Just behind me are the graves of 2,786 German soldiers who never made it home from the First World War. The men who are buried here were spread out between 39 different infantry regiments, and they died fighting nearby or in the Verdun area. Today, this cemetery is maintained by the German War Graves Commission, the Volksbund, and we're gonna go take a look at it. So come on, let's go. The cemetery here at Misari is not a battlefield cemetery in the strict sense. Instead, it was created by the French military authorities after the Second World War as a collective cemetery for German dead from the First World War. Many of the men buried here had originally been laid to rest in temporary graves across around 60 nearby communities, while others were later found daring work in the former battlefields of this region. Today, 2,876 dead are buried here, including 1 nurse and 3 soldiers of the Austro-Hungarian Army. What also stands out is that the men buried here came from no fewer than 39 different infantry divisions, which shows just how heavily this wider area was fought over. After the Franco-German War Graves Agreement of 19 July 1966, the cemetery was given its final form, and in 1972 the temporary wooden grave markers were replaced with metal crosses. Today, the site is maintained by the Volksbund, Deutsche Kriegsgräberfürsorge, the German War Graves Commission. Without the work of the Volksbund, places like this would be far harder to visit, preserve, and remember today. So what I could find on the sources is the people buried here were spread out between 60 different communities, spread as far as 20 kilometers from this area right here. And what's interesting is just down the road, about 10 minutes, you have Harville, which holds another German war cemetery. So walking among these graves, I noticed this one right here, and I can't confirm this with 100% accuracy, but it's the only thing that makes sense to me. Here's Roman and Franz Schotten. They both died on the same day, very likely brothers. That day was the 13th of September 1918, the day that their mother's heart was broken. Roman was an Unteroffizier, which is similar to a sergeant, roughly, and Franz was a musketeer. So one thing I love about German war cemeteries is none of them are the same from the other. They all have a uniqueness to them and they all look a little bit different. Like, for example, the layout of this cemetery has crosses with 2 individuals buried at the plot. But you have to remember, in the First World War, over 100,000 people of Jewish faith fought for the German Empire. So here you also have Jewish gravestones depicting the individual of Jewish faith who fell and fought for the German Empire. For example, here we have Jakob Buchsbaum. He was a Gefreiter, which is like probably a corporal or a sergeant equivalent in the American military. And he fell on the 16th of March, 1916. And next to him, you can see an example of Franz Ruf here, also a Gefreiter, and he fell on the 4th of October, 1916. Just to make a small correction, I said that the crosses depicted 2 individuals buried there. That's actually not true. So what's a common factor in German cemeteries is that the crosses are double-sided, and it's the exact same here. For example, we have these 2 individuals here, Bruno Sachs and Thomas Sprengler, who are both laid to rest here at this cross. And then when we look at the other side, we'll see 2 more individuals, Fritz and Johann, who also lay at rest here. And just knowing that adds so much more impact when you're looking at these crosses, because it's not just one individual per cross, it's multiple names, and just really depicts the suffering, the human sacrifice that the First World War was. It was a meat grinder. So originally when the soldiers were laid to rest here in cemeteries like this, they were all laid to rest under crosses, regardless of their faith. And there's actually an interesting fact that I'm gonna have Danny from the Volksbund tell you guys about that.
So originally most of the World War I cemeteries that we're visiting on this trip were originally battlefield cemeteries. Grave signs here were more or less made out of wood. So it were wooden crosses because of the fighting that was still ongoing, the chaos that was dominating the days for the soldiers serving on the front line. And in immediate aftermath, there were just not enough resources to mark every grave in a proper way. So in the 1960s, there was a campaign launched in Western Germany to improvise and improve all these World War I cemeteries. And all the old wooden crosses were improved and changed to iron crosses, the ones that you see here. This is very famous for German World War I cemeteries. And people began to differentiate between the different religious groups buried on the German cemeteries. There were more or less over 100,000 Jewish Germans fighting during the First World War. And the Volksbund began to set up Jewish headstones for them. So this was done in the 1960s. I think from the 120,000 Jewish soldiers serving on the German side during the First World War, over 12,000 made the ultimate sacrifice. And it was at first in the 1960s that their wooden crosses with their names on it were replaced by proper grave markers like these Jewish steles that you see on the German World War I cemeteries up to this day.
So one common thing you're gonna find at almost any war cemetery you go to are the names of the missing. Now there's a difference between unknown graves, unknown bodies that have crosses to lay under because they have an actual body to lay in the ground, even though that they're unknown. Then there's those of the missing who, with probability, are put into this area and their names are listed on plaques, similar to the ones behind me. And those are the names of the missing soldiers who, through primary sources or through family contact, they're able to be placed in this area, and it's with high probability that they're still out there, maybe one day to be found. So just some food for thought as the sun is setting over Misari German War Cemetery. We get to head home now, but the individuals who are lying here, they never got to go home. Each cross depicts at least 4 different names. That's 4 human lives that ended abruptly, that had families that they'll never get to go back to, that were impacted not only after their deaths, but for generations after. It's important to remember that when you come to a place like this, to a war cemetery. This is, yes, it represents the events that happened, but it has, in my opinion, a deeper meaning. It represents loss of life, loss of people who could have contributed to society that never got to. It's a tragedy when human life is lost. That brings us to an end of our visit here at the German War Cemetery in Misari. It may be a short video without any biographies or any of that you normally would be accustomed to in my videos. However, I hope that we could have learned something together here at this First World War German cemetery here in Misari. If you enjoyed today's content, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel so we can continue learning together. I would greatly appreciate it. And also, take a look at the German War Graves Commission, the Volksbund. They're responsible for maintaining and doing the research of cemeteries like this. And if it wasn't for an organization like them, many of the missing names or the soldiers of Jewish faith wouldn't have the correct headstone. So the work that they do is important, and it's important for us to remember the sacrifices of soldiers on both sides to help us expand our greater historical understanding about the events that took place over 100 years ago, and in an effort to learn from them, learn from history, to learn the uncomfortable parts of history as well, because if we don't learn from it and only look at the comfortable parts, we will never learn from it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys in the next one.